They called him the Ghost, a billionaire whose face appeared in no archive, whose name echoed through offshore accounts and encrypted lines. He moved money like a magician moves smoke, visible only when it was too late. Every government wanted him, but every trace led to another shadow. How do you catch a man who doesn't exist? And what if the man pulling the trigger wasn't the real threat? Tonight, in the rain-soaked lights of Monaco, the empire that never should have been begins to tremble. One mistake, a single overlooked whisper, will soon turn an untouchable god into prey. The meeting was supposed to be invisible, a whisper in the night between ghosts. But even the quietest whisper leaves a trace. As the rain intensified, unseen cameras caught faces that should never have been seen together. Power was shifting hands, and with it, the balance of the underworld. Somewhere inside that penthouse, a billion-dollar secret was being sold. And somewhere else, the FBI's obsession was quietly being born. Elena watched from her vantage point, her pulse steady, but her breath trembling. Years of chasing shadows had led her here, to a man who could destroy economies with a single call. She whispered coordinates to an agent she no longer trusted. Every second ticked like a countdown. She knew that one mistake tonight wouldn't just expose Victor. It would expose her too. Agent Mason had seen monsters before, but nothing like this. Victor wasn't just a criminal. He was an idea, a myth that fed on fear and money. Mason tightened his grip on the radio, eyes darting across rooftops, waiting for a signal that might never come. The longer he watched, the more he felt the trap closing. Not around Victor, but around himself. And then it happened. A flicker on the balcony camera, a movement that shouldn't have been there. Luca turned too late. The sound of a distant click cut through the rain. Inside, Victor's phone lit up with a name that should have been dead for 10 years. The empire shifted, and the first domino fell. The ghost had finally made his mistake. The morning after the storm, the world woke up to silence. Markets opened as usual, yachts shimmered under the sun, and nobody noticed the empire shifting beneath them. Behind those mirrored windows and offshore accounts, $1 billion moved through invisible channels, from Monaco to Dubai, Zurich to Panama. But the bloodline of Victor's power wasn't money. It was loyalty, fear, and silence. And today, one of those would break. Richard Kane was already awake when the encrypted message came through. He'd built Victor's empire one numbered account at a time, and now he watched it begin to fracture. Loyalty was profitable until it wasn't. As the message decrypted, his face paled. A transaction had appeared that he never authorized. Someone inside had moved $30 million without the ghost's permission. And that kind of mistake didn't go unnoticed for long. Elena's handler warned her not to dig deeper, but she couldn't stop. She'd followed money through fake charities and private equity fronts, each leading back to Victor's hidden shell companies. But the deeper she went, the clearer it became. Victor didn't just own corporations. He owned people. Judges, senators, CEOs, all of them connected through invisible lines of favor and fear. And somewhere in that web, a single wire led straight to Washington. While the world saw billion-dollar deals and charity galas, the truth lay beneath them. A network of art sales masking money laundering, tech startups that didn't exist, and blood-soaked contracts hidden under smiles. Victor met his allies inside marble halls and private vaults. Every handshake was a promise, and every promise a weapon. But one of those weapons was now pointed back at him, and he didn't know it yet. By nightfall, the whispers turned into threats. Luca received a call that froze his blood. A voice from the past, warning him that Victor's secret accounts were being sold to the highest bidder. Across the city, Agent Mason intercepted a message meant for Victor himself. For the first time, the FBI had something real. As Victor boarded his private jet, Elena's signal tracker locked on. The hunt was no longer theoretical. The Empire was moving. "You sure? And see, no, I was the..." Some wars are fought with bullets, others with silence. Victor's empire entered a new phase. The invisible war between nations, banks, and intelligence agencies, each fighting for control of the same dark money. His fortune powered both governments and criminals alike, a hidden bloodstream of global corruption. But now, the current was shifting. Someone was leaking information from the inside, and every leak meant death. Agent Mason sat in an underground FBI war room, surrounded by walls of data. Every red string, every blurred photograph, every untraceable transaction pointed to the same man. Victor Ramirez. But Mason was running out of time and allies. For every lead he found, another vanished. It wasn't just the mobster he was fighting. It was an entire system built to protect him. The question now wasn't how to catch Victor, but how deep the FBI itself was already compromised. In a secret villa outside Istanbul, Victor met with his foreign contacts, brokers, bankers, and mercenaries, all bought with offshore gold. He spoke softly, never raising his voice, but every word carried the weight of an empire unknown to him. Elena had already intercepted his new communication network. The very system built to protect him was now feeding her evidence. For the first time, the hunter was being watched. Elena moved like a ghost through foreign cities, hacking Victor's offshore accounts from public cafes and train stations. Every login risked exposure. Every message traced could end her life. But the data she gathered revealed the truth. Victor wasn't just laundering money. He was financing conflicts. Wars, coup, and assassinations, all funded through his financial web. The ghost didn't just hide from governments, he owned them. The message came just before dawn, a single encrypted file sent directly to Mason's desk. Inside was the proof: Victor's network, his shell companies, his private jet schedules. The file was signed with a name Mason hadn't seen in years. Elena had broken every rule, crossed every line, and given him the one thing he'd never had before, a way-in. But as Mason stared at the evidence, another message flashed across his screen. He knows. Every empire has its architects. Victor's were ghosts, lawyers, bankers, and soldiers who had traded souls for silence. They called themselves the Syndicate, a circle bound not by loyalty, but by leverage. From hidden rooms beneath the world's richest cities, they moved money like pieces on a chessboard. But one of those pieces was about to defect, and the entire board would catch fire. Richard Kane had grown tired of being the banker to a ghost. The fortune he'd built for Victor was now the weapon that could destroy him. Late at night, Kane began copying files one by one, sending them to a secret contact inside the FBI. He told himself it was insurance, not betrayal. But deep down, he knew. There was no walking away from Victor Ramirez alive. Across the Atlantic, Agent Mason met with a contact known only by a code name, Echo. Inside a parking garage beneath Washington, the agent received a hard drive that could change everything. But the data came with a warning: Victor has eyes everywhere. Mason knew the deeper he went, the more dangerous it became. Yet something inside him had already crossed the line. Obsession had turned into vengeance. Elena had become the Syndicate's worst nightmare. Invisible and unstoppable. Her stolen access codes were unlocking Victor's most secure accounts, revealing decades of corruption. But Victor was already closing in. Through a network of hired trackers, he traced the signals back to an old safe house outside Marseille. As Elena uploaded the final set of files, she didn't know her time was running out. The ghost was coming home. The betrayal came in silence. Richard Kane's security cameras caught the moment the door opened. A shadow stepped inside, gun drawn, no words spoken. By dawn, his body was found in his study, the files missing, the flash drive gone. Victor had erased another threat. But he didn't realize that Elena had already backed up everything. For the first time, the ghost had lost control of his own empire. Loyalty is a word criminals use until it kills them. As Victor's empire began to crack, loyalty became fear, and fear turned to chaos. His lieutenants vanished, his accounts froze, and his name, once whispered with awe, was now spoken with dread. The ghost was losing control. Yet even cornered, he was still dangerous. The world didn't know it yet, but Victor was about to burn his empire before letting anyone else touch it. Luca Marino had always believed in the ghost, until the night he saw what that belief had cost him. He'd killed, lied, and buried secrets for Victor, but now the orders were madness. Burn everything, silence everyone. Loyalty had become suicide. And for the first time, Luca realized that the only way out of Victor's world was to destroy it from within. Elena's transmission had reached Mason just in time. Inside that data was the entire skeleton of Victor's operation. Names, codes, flight paths, bank keys. It was everything the Bureau had ever needed. But while Mason prepared to take down, Elena went silent. Her last location pinged from the outskirts of Marseille, then vanished. Mason didn't know if she was alive, but he knew one thing. Victor did. Victor's paranoia became ritual. He erased servers, burned ledgers, and relocated his gold through secret airstrips. He spoke to no one except Luca, the last man still standing beside him. But even that bond was break. When Luca hesitated on an order, Victor saw it in his eyes. The crack of disobedience. That was the moment he realized the truth. There were no loyal men left, only survivors. The shot echoed through the hangar like thunder. When it was over, one man lay bleeding, and the other walked away without looking back. By dawn, flames consumed Victor's last stronghold. His accounts were gone, his allies dead, his empire erased. But as Mason's team closed in, a private jet was spotted leaving the coast, destination unknown. The ghost had vanished once more, and somewhere above the clouds, a single thought burned in his mind. You can't arrest a myth. For years, the ghost had lived in perfect precision. Every alias rehearsed, every route rehearsed, every escape flawless. But perfection breeds arrogance, and arrogance breeds error. Somewhere between Zurich and the Cayman Islands, a single document slipped through, the passenger manifest of a private jet. One name, one code, one date. That was all it took to unravel the greatest criminal empire on Earth. Back in Washington, Agent Mason stared at the flight manifest as if it were a confession. For years, the ghost had been untouchable, but this was proof of life. He ordered an immediate intercept, activating every international contact. For the first time, Mason felt the upper hand. But he knew it came with a cost. To bring down Victor Ramirez, he'd have to cross lines the Bureau never allowed. Elena was alive, barely. The explosion had scarred her, but not stopped her. From a hospital in Lisbon, she reached out to Mason through a secure line. Her voice was weak, but her words were sharp. She had the encryption key to Victor's master accounts. Everything depended on getting it to Mason before Victor disappeared again. But she didn't know the ghost was already tracking her signal. Victor's jet touched down in Casablanca under false clearance. His plan was elegant: vanish into the chaos of international trade routes, rebirth himself with a new name and fortune. But as he stepped off the plane, he saw something that froze his composure. Men waiting, not his men. Mason's sting had worked. For the first time, Victor Ramirez hesitated, and in that breath, his empire collapsed. The takedown lasted 47 seconds. A lifetime of secrecy undone by a single piece of paper. As Victor was handcuffed, he smiled. Not the smile of a defeated man, but of someone who knew the truth. Empires don't end. They change ownership. Somewhere across the ocean, new accounts were already opening, new names rising from the ashes. Mason looked at him and wondered, had they caught Victor Ramirez, Or just the mask he wanted them to find? The world woke up to headlines that felt unreal. The Ghost captured. Billionaire mobster behind global crime empire arrested. Governments claimed victory. Banks distanced themselves. And yet, behind the celebration, the truth was already bleeding through. Files were missing. Witnesses vanished. Offshore servers went dark. What the FBI didn't realize was that Victor's capture wasn't the end of the empire. It was the signal for its rebirth. In his cell, Victor didn't look like a man defeated. The walls couldn't contain his reach. They only magnified his patience. Every empire he built had contingency plans. For every dollar frozen, another waited offshore. The FBI had captured a man, not a system. And systems can't be arrested. Somewhere beyond those concrete walls, his empire was already adapting, shape-shifting into something new. Elena survived, but she'd paid the price. Scars ran deeper than skin now. She had lost everything except the truth. She leaked the last of Victor's data to the press, revealing politicians, corporations, and military contracts, all tied to his fortune. The headlines caused chaos. Markets trembled, and the world saw for the first time what power really looked like when stripped of its disguise. Agent Mason became both hero and ghost. Commendations, promotions, and media praise followed, but none of it felt like justice. He had caught a man who didn't exist, yet the world still moved under Victor's shadow. Offshore networks rebooted, and new names replaced the old. Mason understood now that empires like this don't die, they evolve. The question that haunted him was simple. Who was running it now? Months later, in a Zurich boardroom, new faces gathered. The same banks, the same codes, different names. A silent transaction crossed 5 continents in under a second. Somewhere, deep in a prison cell, Victor smiled without reason. His empire hadn't fallen. It had simply learned how to live without him. In the end, power doesn't disappear. It only changes hands.